He was on top of the world with his mistress by his side, dominating the party. But when the door opened and his wife walked in, accompanied by a CEO, the atmosphere froze. The confident man found himself lost amidst curious glances and hidden smiles. The game had changed, but no one knew how yet. The crystal champagne flute shattered against the marble floor of the penthouse, tiny shards scattering like diamonds across the polished surface. The room fell silent as 50 pairs of eyes turned toward Reed Whitfield, whose hand remained frozen in mid-air where the glass had been moments before. "Say that again," Reed whispered, his voice dangerously quiet. Victor Stein, Reed's CFO and oldest friend, shifted uncomfortably. The hushed conversations that had filled the room moments before had stopped entirely, leaving only the soft jazz from the live quartet filtering through the awkward silence. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately," Victor murmured, glancing nervously at the gathering of Chicago's financial elite who were pretending not to stare. "No." Reed's jaw tightened. "I want you to repeat what you just said, right here." The annual charity gala of Whitfield Investments was supposed to be Reed's crowning moment, the night when he would finally announce the Hammersmith acquisition that would cement his legacy. Instead, he stood rigid in his custom Tom Ford tuxedo, facing the unthinkable. "The SEC has opened an investigation," Victor said, his voice barely audible. "They're looking into the Hammersmith deal. Someone leaked information." Reed's steel blue eyes scanned the room, taking in the opulent decorations, the stunning view of Chicago's skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the curious glances of people who had come to worship at the altar of his success. At 47, Reed Whitfield had built Whitfield Investments from nothing into one of Chicago's most prestigious wealth management firms. Tonight was supposed to be his triumph. "Find Meredith," he ordered, straightening his bow tie with steady hands that belied the storm raging within him. "Now." As Victor slipped away, Reed's practiced smile returned to his face. He bent down, picking up a large shard of broken glass. "Hazard of excitement," he announced to the watching crowd with a self-deprecating chuckle. "When you're about to announce the biggest deal of your career, sometimes things break." The crowd laughed politely, and conversations resumed. A server appeared with a dustpan, but Reed waved him away. "I'll take care of my own messes," he said, loud enough for those nearby to hear the double meaning in his words. Across the room, Meredith Vaughn leaned against the bar, her emerald gown catching the light with every subtle movement. At 31, she was the newest addition to Whitfield Investments' executive team and to Reed's bed. Her coppery hair was swept into an elegant updo, exposing the delicate curve of her neck, where Reed had left a mark the night before. "Quite the event," said a deep voice beside her, although our host seems somewhat tense. Meredith turned to find Elias Fletcher standing next to her, looking effortlessly distinguished in his tuxedo. As CEO of Fletcher Technologies, Elias was one of the few men in Chicago whose wealth rivaled Reed's, though their methods of acquiring it couldn't have been more different. "Mr. Fletcher," Meredith smiled, extending her hand, "I didn't expect to see you here tonight." "Reed and I have our differences," Elias said, his Jamaican accent barely perceptible after decades in America, "but we support the same causes. Besides, I never miss a chance to see how the other half lives." His eyes, warm and perceptive, studied her face before glancing toward Reed, who was now engaged in conversation with the mayor. "How long have you been working for Whitfield?" Elias asked. 6 months, Meredith replied. "I run their marketing department." "And how long have you been sleeping with him?" Meredith's smile faltered for only a moment before returning, sharper than before. "You certainly don't waste time with small talk, do you?" "Life's too short," Elias shrugged, "especially when you're playing with fire." Before Meredith could respond, Victor appeared at her elbow. "Reed needs you," he said, his expression grim. "Now." As Meredith excused herself and followed Victor through the crowd, Elias watched thoughtfully, swirling his whiskey. He pulled out his phone and typed a quick message. "She's here. You were right." Meanwhile, in a luxurious brownstone across town, Juliet Whitfield sat alone in the living room, staring at the phone in her hand. The text from her sister glowed on the screen. "Are you sure about this? There's no going back." Juliet's finger hovered over the reply button. At 42, she had spent the last 15 years of her life as Reed Whitfield's wife, a role that had slowly eroded her sense of self until she barely recognized the woman in the mirror. The elegant art history graduate from the University of Chicago had become nothing more than an accessory to her husband's ambition. Except tonight. Tonight, while Reed believed she was visiting her sister in Boston, Juliet was about to set in motion the plan she had been crafting for months. The evidence was organized in folders on her laptop. Records of Reed's affairs, his questionable business dealings, the offshore accounts he thought she knew nothing about. But most importantly, she had the truth about the Hammersmith deal. Her phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. The caller ID showed Camila Rodriguez, her personal assistant and the only person besides her sister who knew what she was planning. "They're all there," Camila reported without preamble. "Reed, Meredith, the mayor, even Elias Fletcher showed up." "And the SEC?" Juliet asked, her voice steady. "They'll be making the announcement tomorrow morning. Your anonymous tip was very thorough." Juliet closed her eyes, remembering the moment 6 months ago when she discovered the first message between Reed and Meredith. She had been searching for an earring in Reed's office when she accidentally knocked his unlocked phone off the desk. The message that appeared on the screen was explicit enough to leave no doubt about their relationship. It wasn't the first time Reed had strayed, but something in Juliet had finally broken. She began paying attention to his late nights, his business trips, the way he spoke about the talented new marketing director, and in the process of tracking his infidelity, she had discovered something far worse. "What about the documents?" Juliet asked. "Ready to be delivered to the right people," Camila assured her. "Are you certain about this, Juliet? It will destroy him." Juliet looked at the sapphire dress hanging on her closet door, the one Reed had never seen, the one she'd purchased specifically for tonight. "He destroyed us long ago," she replied. "He just doesn't know it yet." Back at the gala, Reed pulled Meredith into his private office, closing the door with a decisive click. "What did you do?" he demanded, his composed facade vanishing the moment they were alone. "What are you talking about?" Meredith stepped back, her shoulder blades pressing against the wall. "The SEC, Meredith. They're investigating the Hammersmith deal. Someone gave them information that only a handful of people had access to." Meredith's eyes widened. "And you think it was me?" "Reed, that's insane. I've been by your side every step of the way on this deal." "Exactly," Reed said, moving closer until he towered over her. "You've been by my side. In meetings you had no business attending. Looking at documents you had no reason to see. Because you wanted me there." Meredith's voice rose. "You brought me in. You said you trusted me." Reed studied her face, searching for signs of deception. 6 months ago he had hired Meredith, despite her limited experience, captivated by her intelligence and ambition. And yes, by the way she looked at him as if he were a god among men. Something his wife hadn't done in years. "If I find out you betrayed me," he said softly, "there won't be a financial firm in this country that will hire you to answer phones." Meredith's expression hardened. "You know what your problem is, Reed. You're so obsessed with being betrayed that you can't see who's actually loyal to you." She pushed past him toward the door, then paused with her hand on the knob. "And for the record, maybe you should be asking yourself who else might have a reason to want to see you fall." As she left, Reed turned to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline he had conquered. The Hammersmith acquisition was set to double the value of Whitfield Investments overnight. He had leveraged everything for this deal: his reputation, his company's assets, relationships with clients who trusted him with their fortunes. His phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. When he opened it, his blood turned to ice. It was a photo of Juliet, not in Boston as she'd claimed, but in Chicago, entering a restaurant with Elias Fletcher. The timestamp showed it was taken 2 hours ago. Reed stared at the image, his mind racing. Juliet and Elias. It seemed impossible. They had never even met, as far as he knew. Unless... The pieces began falling into place with sickening clarity. Juliet's convenient trip, coinciding with his biggest professional night. The SEC investigation. The mysterious photo sent from an anonymous source. His wife and his biggest rival were working together against him. Reed's fist closed around his phone so tightly that his knuckles turned white. In the 15 years of their marriage, he had underestimated Juliet, dismissing her as the quiet, supportive wife who had given up her career to stand in his shadow. He had cheated on her, lied to her, and gradually stopped seeing her at all. Now, it seemed, she was ensuring he would never forget her again. The door opened, and Victor stepped inside. Reed, they're waiting for your speech. Reed smoothed down his jacket, his mind racing with possibilities and escape routes. Tell them I'll be right there. What are we going to do about the SEC? Victor asked, his normally confident demeanor shaken. Reed's smile was cold as he dropped his phone into his pocket. First, we're going to make a toast to our success. Then we're going to announce the Hammersmith deal as planned. But the investigation will be dealt with, Reed finished. One problem at a time, Victor. Right now, we have guests to entertain. As Reed stepped back into the grand hall, glass of champagne in hand, the crowd applauded. He took his place at the podium, the perfect picture of success and confidence. No one would have guessed that his world was collapsing around him. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice strong and assured, thank you for joining us on this momentous occasion. The elevator doors at the back of the room opened silently. Tonight marks not just a celebration of what Whitfield Investments has achieved, but a glimpse into our future. The crowd parted as someone moved through it toward the front of the room. A future that begins with our acquisition of Hammersmith Financial, which I'm proud to announce. Reed's voice died in his throat as he looked up and saw Juliet walking toward him, resplendent in sapphire blue, her eyes locked on his. And behind her, watching with undisguised interest, stood Elias Fletcher. The champagne glass in Reed's hand trembled ever so slightly as Juliet stopped at the front of the crowd, her smile serene and terrifying. "Hello, darling," she said, her voice carrying in the sudden silence. "I hope I'm not too late for the big announcement." The room held its collective breath as Reed's fingers tightened around the podium. His eyes darted between Juliet and Elias, calculating his next move with the precision of a chess master who'd just discovered his queen was in jeopardy. "Juliet," he recovered smoothly, his public persona sliding back into place. "What a wonderful surprise. I thought you were in Boston." "Plans change," she replied, her voice carrying just enough warmth to seem appropriate for the occasion. "I couldn't miss your big night." The crowd relaxed, collectively interpreting the moment as a touching show of spousal support. Only those closest to Reed, Victor standing anxiously to the side, Meredith watching from near the bar with narrowed eyes, could sense the dangerous undercurrent. "Ladies and gentlemen," Reed continued, never breaking eye contact with his wife, "it seems we have even more to celebrate tonight. Please welcome my wife, Juliet, who has made a special trip to be with us." Polite applause filled the room. Juliet inclined her head graciously, while Elias remained a step behind her, his expression revealing nothing. "And of course, Elias Fletcher of Fletcher Technologies," Reed added, his tone conveying none of the rage building inside him. "A surprise addition to our guest list." "Reed," Elias nodded, stepping forward, "I hope you don't mind the intrusion. I ran into Juliet earlier this evening and offered to escort her." Before Reed could respond, a tall woman with silver-streaked black hair approached Juliet, embracing her warmly. "Juliet, darling, no one told me you'd be here tonight." "Diana," Juliet returned the embrace. It was a last-minute decision. Diana Hammerschmidt, the 65-year-old matriarch of Hammerschmidt Financial and one of Chicago's most influential businesswomen, turned toward Reed with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Reed, you must be thrilled to have your wife join us for this announcement. Family support is so crucial during these transitions." The emphasis on her last word wasn't lost on Reed. Diana had been reluctant to sell her family's company from the beginning, but the board had outvoted her. Now she stood beside his wife, both women watching him with eerily similar expressions. "Nothing more important than family," Reed agreed, raising his glass, "which brings me back to our announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, Whitfield Investments is proud to announce our acquisition of Hammersmith Financial, bringing together two of Chicago's most respected financial institutions." Camera flashes popped as reporters captured the moment. Reed continued his prepared speech, detailing the benefits of the merger, while studiously avoiding looking at either his wife or Elias. When he finished, the room erupted in applause, and guests began to mingle once more. As Reed stepped away from the podium, Diana approached him, her voice low. "Impressive speech, Reed. Almost made me believe you actually care about my father's legacy, rather than just the assets you're stripping." Reed's smile remained fixed. "The deal benefits everyone, Diana. Your shareholders get their payout, your employees keep their jobs, and your father's name lives on as part of something bigger." "Yes, I've heard your pitch." Diana's grey eyes were sharp as flint. "I've also heard other things. about how you secured certain regulatory approvals, about certain offshore movements preceding our stock valuation." Reed's expression didn't change, but a muscle in his jaw twitched. "Careful, Diana. Unfounded accusations can lead to unpleasant legal situations." "Nothing I've said is an accusation," she replied smoothly. "Merely observations between colleagues." "But I wonder, does your wife make similar observations?" Before Reed could respond, Diana glided away to join Juliet and Elias, who were now conversing with the mayor. The three of them looked comfortable together, too comfortable for people who supposedly had just met. "You're going to want to see this," Victor muttered, suddenly at Reed's side. He discreetly handed Reed a tablet with an email displayed on the screen. The message was from the SEC Enforcement Division to the Board of Whitfield Investments, requesting a freeze on all transactions related to the Hammerschmidt acquisition pending investigation. It was time-stamped 30 minutes ago. "Who else has seen this?" Reed asked, his voice deadly calm. "Just me so far. It came to the secure board email." "Keep it that way." Reed handed the tablet back. "Delay any response until morning. I need time to handle this." Victor hesitated. "Reed, if the SEC is officially investigating, just do it, Victor." Reed cut him off. "Trust me." As Victor reluctantly walked away, Reed felt a presence at his elbow. Meredith had appeared, a fresh champagne flute in her hand. "Trouble in paradise?" she asked, nodding toward Juliet. "I thought she was conveniently out of town." "Not now, Meredith." "Yes, now." She stepped closer, her voice barely audible. "You accuse me of betraying you, but your wife shows up with your biggest competitor on the night the SEC launches an investigation? Even you can do that math." Reed turned to face her fully. Meredith was ambitious and calculating, traits he had admired and exploited, but she was also intelligent enough to be dangerous. "What do you know about the SEC investigation?" he asked directly. Meredith's expression revealed a flicker of surprise. "Only what Victor told me, that they're looking into the Hammerschmidt deal, but seeing Juliet with Fletcher makes me wonder who's really playing who." Reed studied her face, searching for deception. "If you're lying to me, I'm not the one you should be worried about," she interrupted, her gaze drifting toward Juliet. "While you've been treating your wife like a decorative object, she's been making friends with Diana Hammerschmidt and Elias Fletcher. That's not coincidence, Reed. That's conspiracy." Across the room, Camila Rodriguez watched the interchange with interest. As Juliet's personal assistant for the past 5 years, Camila had developed an almost uncanny ability to read situations, and right now she could see Reed's carefully constructed world beginning to fracture. She caught Juliet's eye and gave an imperceptible nod. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Juliet excused herself from her conversation with Diana and Elias and made her way to the bar. As expected, Reed intercepted her. "What the hell are you doing?" he hissed, maintaining his smile for the benefit of nearby guests. "Having a drink at my husband's gala," Juliet replied calmly, signaling the bartender. "Gin and tonic, please." "You know what I mean. You're supposed to be in Boston, and suddenly you're here with Elias Fletcher." Juliet accepted her drink, taking a slow sip before responding. "Plans change, Reed. Isn't that what you always say? Adapt or die." "How do you even know Fletcher?" Reed demanded. "Chicago's art world isn't that large, Reed. Elias is a major donor to the Institute. We met at a fundraiser last month and discovered we have similar interests." The deliberate ambiguity hung between them. Reed's eyes narrowed. "Whatever game you're playing, it won't work. You don't have the stomach for it." Juliet's smile took on a sad quality. "That's always been your problem, Reed. You've never really seen me at all." Before he could respond, she touched his arm lightly, a gesture that would appear affectionate to observers. "Oh, and congratulations on the Hammerschmidt acquisition. Such a timely announcement." She walked away, leaving Reed momentarily speechless. The implication was clear. She knew about the SEC investigation. Nearby, a distinguished gentleman in his 70s observed the exchange with interest. Judge Harold Montgomery had known Reed since the beginning of his career, having been an early investor in Whitfield Investments. He had also known Juliet's father and had watched with disappointment as the once vibrant young woman had faded into Reed's shadow. "Trouble at home, Reed?" the judge asked as Reed approached him. "Nothing serious, Harold. Just surprised to see Juliet here tonight." The judge's expression suggested he wasn't convinced. Surprised is certainly one word for it. Concerned might be another, given the company she's keeping. Reed accepted a fresh drink from a passing server. Fletcher's harmless, making a social play, that's all. Is that what you think? Judge Montgomery's bushy eyebrows rose. Son, I've been watching you build this company for 15 years, and I've admired your drive. But you've always had a blind spot when it comes to the people closest to you. Meaning? Meaning that while you've been focused on conquering Chicago's financial world, you've missed what's happening in your own home. The judge leaned closer. Did you know your wife has been meeting with Diana Hammerschmidt regularly for the past 3 months? Or that she's been in contact with the SEC's new enforcement director, who happens to be her college roommate's husband? Reed's composure slipped for a heartbeat. How do you know this? Chicago's a small town when you've lived here as long as I have, the judge replied. People talk, and lately they've been talking about Juliet Whitfield stepping out of her husband's shadow. Across the room, Elias Fletcher excused himself from a conversation and stepped onto the terrace. Once alone, he made a phone call. It's happening exactly as you predicted, he said quietly. Reed's completely blindsided. And Juliet? Asked the voice on the other end. Playing her part perfectly. You wouldn't know she's been planning this for months. What about the SEC notice? Delivered. The board will see it by morning, but Reed's already trying to suppress it. Good, the voice replied. And the documents? Elias glanced through the glass doors, his eyes finding Juliet in the crowd. She has them. All of them. Perfect. By this time tomorrow, Reed Whitfield will be watching everything he's built crumble around him. You're sure about this? Elias asked, his voice revealing a hint of concern. Once we cross this line, he crossed it first, the voice interrupted sharply. 15 years ago, when he stole everything and left me with nothing. This isn't revenge, Elias, it's justice. As Elias ended the call, he was unaware of Meredith standing in the shadows at the other end of the terrace, having heard every word. Inside, Reed had pulled Victor into a corner, his patience exhausted. I need to know what we're dealing with, he demanded. How bad is the SEC investigation? Victor's face was grave. Bad, Reed. They have documentation of the offshore transfers, the manipulated valuations, even the meetings with Commissioner Taylor. That's impossible, Reed hissed. Those meetings were completely off the record. The only people who knew were you, me, and... He stopped abruptly, his gaze finding Juliet across the room. She was engaged in conversation with the mayor, but as if sensing his stare, she looked up. Their eyes locked, and for the first time Reed saw something in his wife's expression he had never seen before. Triumph. Jesus, Reed breathed. It was her. She's been gathering evidence. What? Victor looked confused. Juliet, that's crazy, Reed. She doesn't know anything about our business operations. Doesn't she? Reed's mind raced through the past months, remembering the nights he'd worked from home, the files he'd left in his study, the conversations he'd had while she was supposedly absorbed in her book or tablet. She's been in our house, in my office. She has access to my personal devices, my schedule, my contacts. But why? Why would she? Victor stopped as his eyes tracked to where Meredith had rejoined the party. Ah, Reed followed his gaze. That's not it. Juliet has always turned a blind eye to indiscretions. Has she? Victor asked quietly. Or has she been watching and waiting all this time? Before Reed could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. 2 men in dark suits were scanning the room with purpose. Federal agents, Victor whispered. SEC Enforcement Division. Reed's heart hammered in his chest, but his face revealed nothing. Stay calm, they can't do anything without formal charges. Mr. Whitfield? One of the agents approached, badge in hand. I'm Agent Daniels with the Securities and Exchange Commission. We need to speak with you regarding certain transactions pertaining to Hammerschmidt Financial. The room fell silent again, all eyes on Reed. In that moment of perfect crisis, he did what he had always done best. He projected absolute confidence. Of course, Agent Daniels, my firm is always cooperative with regulatory inquiries. His voice carried throughout the room. However, as you can see, we're in the middle of a charitable event. Perhaps we could schedule this for first thing tomorrow morning. The agent hesitated, clearly not expecting such a composed response. This is a time-sensitive matter, Mr. Whitfield. I understand, Reed replied smoothly. But unless you have a warrant, I'm afraid I must insist on following proper channels. My legal team will be available at 8 a.m. tomorrow. As the agents conferred quietly, Reed caught Juliet watching the exchange, her expression unreadable. Beside her stood Diana Hammerschmidt, whose slight smile suggested she was enjoying the spectacle. It was at that precise moment that Reed's phone vibrated. He glanced down to see a message from an unknown number. "Check your private email immediately. You have 5 minutes to accept the terms or everything goes public." Reed excused himself with practiced ease, stepping into his private office as the agents continued their hushed conference. His hands remained steady as he unlocked his secure laptop and accessed his private email account, one not connected to Whitfield Investments servers. There it was, from an encrypted address: "Final notice, settlement terms." The attachment opened to reveal a document so devastating that Reed had to grip the edge of his desk to steady himself. It contained comprehensive evidence of every shortcut, every manipulation, every ethical line he'd crossed in building Whitfield Investments. The offshore accounts, the manipulated valuations, the bribes to Commissioner Taylor disguised as consulting fees. Most damning of all was an audio recording embedded in the file. Reed's own voice discussing how to artificially inflate Hammerschmidt's debt load to drive down the acquisition price. "You're done, Reed," said a voice from the doorway. Reed looked up to find Judge Montgomery standing there, his elderly frame suddenly imposing in a way it had never been before. "Harold," Reed managed, quickly minimizing the screen. "This isn't the best time." The judge closed the door behind him. "On the contrary, it's exactly the right time. Before you make another mistake." Reed's mind raced, evaluating options, escape routes, countermeasures. "Whatever you think you know." "I know everything," Montgomery interrupted, his voice eerily calm. "Just as Juliet does. Just as the SEC will by morning, unless you agree to the terms in that email." The revelation hit Reed like a physical blow. "You're part of this." "I've been part of this from the beginning," Montgomery confirmed, settling into the leather chair across from Reed's desk. 15 years ago, I watched you steal Richard Whitfield's company from under him while he was dying of cancer. I watched you marry his daughter and systematically erase her from her own legacy." Reed's jaw tightened. Richard was making fatal mistakes. The company would have collapsed. "I saved it." "You stripped it for parts and rebuilt it in your image," Montgomery corrected. "And in the process you violated securities laws, committed fraud, and betrayed the man who mentored you. And now what?" Reed's voice took on a dangerous edge. "Juliet and her conspirators blackmail me? Take my company, my money?" Montgomery studied him with something resembling pity. "After all this time, that's still all you see. Assets, possessions, things to win or lose." He leaned forward. "Read the terms, Reed. You have 3 minutes left." Reed turned back to the screen, quickly scanning the document. The terms were surprisingly straightforward. Reed would resign as CEO of Whitfield Investments, effective immediately, citing health concerns. He would relinquish all voting rights to his shares, transferring control to a blind trust. He would walk away with his personal wealth intact, but no role in the company's future. The Hammerschmidt acquisition would proceed, but under substantially revised terms protecting the employees and legacy. In exchange, all evidence of securities fraud and regulatory violations would remain private. "This is extortion," Reed said flatly. "This is mercy," Montgomery countered. "More than you deserve." Reed's phone buzzed with an incoming call from Victor. He ignored it, his mind working through scenarios, calculating odds as he always did in moments of crisis. "And if I refuse? Then by 9 a.m. tomorrow, the SEC will have every piece of evidence in that file. By noon, you'll be indicted. By evening, everything you've built will be worthless." Montgomery checked his watch. "1 minute, Reed." Outside, the gala continued, Chicago's elite mingling obliviously while Reed's world collapsed in the quiet of his office. Through the glass walls, he could see Juliet engaged in conversation with Elias Fletcher, her face animated in a way he hadn't seen in years. Something twisted inside him, not just anger or fear, but a strange, unfamiliar ache. When had she become a stranger to him? When had he stopped seeing her as anything but an extension of his own success? 30 seconds, Montgomery said quietly. Reed turned back to the screen, cursor hovering over the Accept Terms button. His entire identity was wrapped up in Whitfield Investments. Without it, who was he? As the seconds ticked down, a memory surfaced, Juliet on their wedding day, looking at him with such hope and trust that it had momentarily terrified him. "Promise me you'll remember what matters," she had whispered before they exchanged vows. He had broken that promise long ago. "Time's up, Reed." With a swift click, Reed accepted the terms. A confirmation message appeared immediately. Agreement recorded. Details to follow. Montgomery nodded once, a small gesture of acknowledgement rather than approval. You've made the right choice. Did I have one? Reed asked bitterly. We always have choices, the judge replied, rising from his chair. You made yours years ago when you decided that success justified any means. As Montgomery reached the door, Reed called after him. Did she ever love me? Or was I just a way to save her father's company? The old man paused, his hand on the doorknob. Juliet loved you completely. That's what made her so blind to who you really were until she wasn't. The door closed behind him, leaving Reed alone with the realization that he had lost far more than his company. When Reed finally emerged from his office, the party had reached that perfect pitch of champagne-fueled exuberance. He moved through the crowd mechanically, accepting congratulations on the Hammerschmidt announcement, exchanging pleasantries with people who had no idea they were witnessing his last moments as king of the empire he'd built. Victor intercepted him near the bar. Where the hell have you been? The SEC agents left, but they've scheduled a formal interview for tomorrow morning. Cancel it, Reed said, his voice hollow. Then call an emergency board meeting for 8 a.m. Victor stared at him. What's going on, Reed? I'm stepping down as CEO, effective immediately. You're what? Victor hissed, pulling Reed toward a quiet corner. Have you lost your mind? Reed's laugh held no humor. On the contrary, I think I've finally found it. He nodded toward the dance floor where Juliet was now dancing with Elias, her movements graceful and uninhibited. I underestimated her, Victor. We all did. Following his gaze, Victor's expression shifted from confusion to dawning comprehension. Juliet is behind the SEC investigation. Juliet, Montgomery, probably Diana Hammerschmidt too. Reed took a deep breath. They've had months to gather evidence, build a case. I've been so focused on the deal that I never saw it coming. So you're just giving up? That's not like you, Reed. It's not giving up, Reed replied, surprising himself with how calm he felt. It's recognizing when you've been outplayed. As Victor processed this, Meredith appeared beside them, her face flushed from dancing. There you are. Everyone's wondering why you're hiding in corners when you should be celebrating. Reed studied her, seeing her clearly perhaps for the first time, the calculated ambition in her eyes, the precision with which she had inserted herself into his life and company. How long have you known? He asked quietly. Meredith's smile faltered. Known what? About Juliet's plan. About Montgomery's involvement. Her expression gave nothing away, but Reed caught the slight tensing of her shoulders. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. Reed moved closer, lowering his voice. I think that's why you've been downloading confidential files for the past month. Insurance in case things went sideways. Surprise flickered across Meredith's face before she could mask it. Your IT security is better than I thought. Not really. But I do read the access logs when sensitive files are involved. Reed's smile was devoid of warmth. The question is, are you working with Juliet? Or is this your own side game? For a moment, Meredith's carefully constructed facade cracked, revealing the calculating mind beneath. Smart men diversify their investments, Reed. Smart women do the same with their loyalties. Before Reed could respond, the sounds of silverware tapping against crystal drew everyone's attention. Diana Hammerschmidt had taken the stage, elegant in midnight blue, her silver hair gleaming under the chandeliers. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice commanding immediate respect. I'd like to say a few words about tonight's announcement. Reed felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't planned. As many of you know, Hammerschmidt Financial was founded by my father 60 years ago with a simple principle: integrity above all else. Diana's gaze swept the room, lingering momentarily on Reed. Throughout the negotiations with Whitfield Investments, I've insisted that this principle remain at the heart of our combined enterprise. Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. That's why I'm delighted to announce that as part of this transition, we will be establishing the Hammerschmidt Whitfield Ethics Foundation, dedicated to promoting transparency and accountability in financial services. Diana smiled, raising her glass. And I can think of no one better to lead this initiative than Juliet Whitfield, whose commitment to these values has been unwavering. The room erupted in applause as Juliet joined Diana on stage, graciously accepting the recognition. Reed watched, frozen in place, as his wife, the woman he had dismissed as irrelevant to his business ambitions, was publicly positioned as the moral compass of his company's future. Furthermore, Diana continued once the applause died down, in light of the expanded scope of our combined operations, the board has unanimously agreed that fresh leadership will be essential. While Reed Whitfield has built an impressive organization, we believe the next chapter requires a different approach. The room grew quiet, all eyes moving between Diana and Reed. Effective tomorrow morning, Reed will be stepping into an advisory role, while day-to-day operations will be overseen by a transition committee headed by Judge Harold Montgomery. The announcement landed like a bomb in the elegant room. Reed felt dozens of eyes turn toward him, waiting for his reaction. With supreme effort, he maintained his composed expression, even managing a small nod of acknowledgement. This public execution had not been part of the terms he'd agreed to. Across the room, Juliet's eyes met his. There was no triumph in her gaze, no vindictive satisfaction, only a deep sadness that somehow cut deeper than any gloating could have. As Diana finished her speech, Reed slipped away from the crowd, making his way to the private elevator. He needed air, needed space to think, needed to escape the smothering weight of his collapsing reality. The elevator doors opened to reveal Elias Fletcher. "Going somewhere, Reed?" Elias asked, his voice neutral. "Just getting some air," Reed replied stiffly. "I assume you're enjoying the show." "I take no pleasure in another man's downfall," Elias said, stepping aside to let Reed enter the elevator, "even when it's deserved." As the doors closed, sealing them in the small space together, Elias turned to face Reed directly. "She didn't want it to happen this way, you know." "Spare me," Reed snapped. "Juliet orchestrated this entire takedown with surgical precision." "Yes, she did," Elias acknowledged. "But the public announcement tonight, that was Diana's choice, not Juliet's." The elevator ascended silently toward the rooftop garden. "Why are you telling me this?" Reed asked finally. "Because despite everything, she still cares what happens to you." Reed laughed bitterly. "She has a strange way of showing it." "Does she?" Elias countered. "She could have gone straight to the authorities with evidence of your fraud. Instead, she arranged a way for you to walk away with your freedom and personal wealth intact." The elevator doors opened onto the rooftop garden, Chicago's skyline glittering against the night sky. Reed stepped out, his mind racing. "There's something else you should know," Elias said, remaining in the elevator. "Something about Meredith Vaughn." Reed turned. "What about her?" "She's not who you think she is." Elias held the door open with one hand. "Her real name is Meredith Whitfield, Richard's niece, your cousin by marriage." The revelation hit Reed with the force of a physical blow. "That's impossible. Richard had no siblings." "Half-sister," Elias corrected, "from his father's first marriage. The family connection was deliberately concealed when you hired her." As the elevator doors began to close, Elias delivered his final words. "You might want to check what files she's been accessing, particularly those related to Richard's original ownership stake." The doors shut, leaving Reed alone on the rooftop, the cold Chicago wind whipping around him as his carefully constructed world continued to unravel piece by piece. He pulled out his phone with trembling hands, finally understanding the true nature of the trap he had walked into. It wasn't just Juliet and her allies he had to fear. It was the enemy he had unwittingly invited into his inner circle. The message that appeared on his screen confirmed his worst fears. "Original Whitfield shares transferring back to rightful family line. Poetic justice, don't you think, cousin?" 3 days after the gala, Reed sat alone in his home office, surrounded by the trappings of a success that had evaporated overnight. The morning newspapers lay scattered across his desk, their headlines merciless. "Whitfield steps down amid regulatory scrutiny. Chicago financial titan falls. Hammerschmidt-Whitfield merger proceeds under new leadership." The financial press had been brutal but factual. The society columns were worse, gleefully dissecting his public humiliation with phrases like "spectacular downfall" and "karmic justice." One particularly vicious piece speculated about Juliet's relationship with Elias Fletcher, suggesting their close friendship had blossomed while Reed was otherwise occupied with his young marketing director. Reed hadn't seen or spoken to Juliet since the night of the gala. She hadn't returned to their lakefront penthouse, and his calls went straight to voicemail. His lawyer informed him that she was staying at her sister's apartment and requested space while they worked out separation terms. The doorbell rang, pulling Reed from his thoughts. He ignored it, as he had ignored the calls from former colleagues and so-called friends. The persistent visitor eventually stopped, only to be replaced by the sound of a key in the lock. Victor Stein appeared in the doorway of Reed's office, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Ah, you look terrible," Victor observed, taking in Reed's unshaven face and rumpled clothes. "I wasn't expecting company," Reed replied flatly. "How did you get in?" "Juliet gave me her key. She's worried about you." Reed laughed humorlessly. "That's rich, coming from the architect of my destruction." Victor pulled up a chair sitting across from Reed. "Is that what you think? That Juliet did this to destroy you? What would you call it?" "Self-preservation," Victor replied simply. "She saw what was coming, what you didn't want to see, and she protected herself, and you, whether you believe it or not." Reed's temper flared. "Protected me? By stripping me of my company? By humiliating me in front of everyone who matters in this city? By keeping you out of federal prison," Victor countered. "The SEC has enough to put you away for a decade, Reed. The deal Juliet orchestrated lets you walk away with your freedom and most of your fortune intact." Reed fell silent, the truth of Victor's words sinking in. "Why are you here?" he finally asked. "Because someone needs to pull you out of this tailspin before you make things worse." Victor leaned forward. "The board meeting is tomorrow. You need to be there, clean-shaven and clear-headed, to formally resign and endorse the transition plan. And if I don't, then the alternative arrangement goes into effect." Victor's expression was grim. "All evidence goes to the authorities, and the company publicly disavows you to save itself." Reed stood abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked Lake Michigan. "You knew, didn't you? About Juliet's plan? About Meredith?" Victor was quiet for a long moment. "I suspected Juliet knew more than she let on. As for Meredith, I had concerns about her from the beginning, but you wouldn't listen. Why didn't you warn me?" "I tried, Reed. For years I've tried to warn you about the corners you were cutting, the enemies you were making. You didn't want to hear it." The truth of this statement hung in the air between them. Reed had indeed dismissed Victor's caution as unnecessary conservatism, an impediment to the aggressive growth he envisioned. "What about Montgomery?" Reed asked. "Was he always working against me?" "Harold was Richard's best friend," Victor replied. "He watched you take over Richard's company and systematically erase his legacy. Then he watched you do the same to Richard's daughter. I think he's been waiting for this moment for 15 years. Reed absorbed this, remembering how Montgomery had been one of his earliest investors, always supportive, always present at key moments. The perfect inside man. "And Meredith? Have they found her?" Victor shook his head. "Vanished, along with a significant number of confidential files. The IT team is still assessing the damage." Reed turned back to face his oldest friend. "You should have been on my side, Victor. After everything we've built together." "I have always been on your side," Victor replied quietly. "But somewhere along the way, you started confusing loyalty with complicity." The words struck Reed with unexpected force. He sank back into his chair, suddenly exhausted. "What happens now?" "Now you start over," Victor said simply. "You're 47, not dead. You've got your personal wealth, your connections, your experience. This doesn't have to be the end unless you make it one." After Victor left, Reed remained motionless in his office as evening fell over Chicago. For the first time in decades, he had no calls to return, no deals to close, no empire to expand. The silence was deafening. On impulse, he pulled open his desk drawer and extracted a small leather-bound journal, Richard Whitfield's diary, which Reed had kept after his death. He had never read it, seeing it merely as a sentimental relic of a man who had failed to adapt to changing times. Now he opened it, turning to a random page from 15 years ago. Reed shows remarkable talent for finding opportunity where others see only risk. In that way, he reminds me of myself at his age. I worry, though, about his impatience, his belief that the ends always justify the means. So I've tried to show him that true success leaves no casualties, but I fear he sees my ethics as weakness. Perhaps Juliet can temper this in him. She has always seen the best in people, even when they cannot see it in themselves. Reed closed the journal, a strange tightness in his chest. Richard had seen him clearly, his strengths and his fatal flaws, even then. The next morning, Reed arrived at Whitfield Investments, soon to be Hammerschmidt Whitfield Financial, immaculately dressed in a custom suit, clean-shaven, the image of professional composure. The receptionist's eyes widened in surprise as he crossed the lobby, but she recovered quickly. "Mr. Whitfield, good morning. The board is assembled in the main conference room." Thank you, Sophia. Reed paused. For what it's worth, I always appreciated your professionalism. The young woman blinked, clearly not expecting personal remarks from the notoriously brusque CEO. Thank you, sir. As Reed walked the familiar corridor toward the boardroom, employees stopped to stare, conversations halting mid-sentence. Some looked away, embarrassed. Others met his gaze with undisguised curiosity, or in a few cases, barely concealed satisfaction. Outside the boardroom, Camilla Rodriguez, Juliet's assistant, waited with a folder in hand. Mr. Whitfield, she greeted him with professional neutrality. Mrs. Whitfield asked me to give you these before the meeting, for your reference. Reed accepted the folder, recognizing it as containing the formal resignation and transition documents. Is she here? No, sir, Camilla replied. She felt her presence might complicate matters. Reed nodded, unsurprised but nevertheless disappointed. You've been loyal to her for a long time. She's easy to be loyal to, Camilla said simply. The boardroom fell silent as Reed entered. Around the polished table sat the directors of Whitfield Investments, men and women who had until days ago deferred to his every decision. Now they watched him with expressions ranging from pity to barely concealed hostility. Judge Montgomery sat at the head of the table in Reed's usual chair. Diana Hammerschmidt was beside him, elegant and composed. Victor nodded slightly from his position halfway down the table. Thank you for joining us, Reed, Montgomery began, his tone formal. As you know, we're here to finalize the leadership transition and approve the revised terms of the Hammerschmidt acquisition. Reed took the only empty seat, directly across from Montgomery. Before we begin, I'd like to say something. Montgomery exchanged glances with Diana, then nodded. Go ahead. Reed looked around the table, meeting each person's gaze before speaking. I built this company from the ground up. Every decision I made, good or bad, ethical or not, was driven by my commitment to making Whitfield Investments a leader in our industry. He paused, noticing the surprise on several faces at his lack of defensiveness. I also made mistakes, serious ones. I cut corners, crossed lines, and ultimately betrayed the principles that should have guided us. For that, I apologize. The silence in the room deepened, no one quite believing what they were hearing. I've reviewed the transition plan, Reed continued, tapping the folder Camilla had given him. It's fair, more than fair given the circumstances. I will sign the resignation and endorse Judge Montgomery as interim chairman. Montgomery's bushy eyebrows rose slightly. That's unexpected, Reed, thank you. With one condition, Reed added. Diana Hammerschmidt leaned forward. You're hardly in a position to make demands, Mr. Whitfield. Not a demand, a request. Reed turned to face her directly. The Ethics Foundation that you announced, I want to contribute to it personally. Not just money, but time, experience. Murmurs of surprise rippled around the table. Why would you want that? Diana asked, suspicious. Reed's answer was simple. Because I've spent 15 years showing this industry how to bend rules for profit. Perhaps I can spend the next 15 showing how to succeed without compromise. The board members exchanged skeptical glances. A convenient conversion, one director commented. Perhaps, Reed acknowledged, but sometimes clarity comes only after losing everything you thought mattered. After the meeting, Reed found himself alone in his former office, packing the few personal items he wished to keep. Most of the mementos, the deal trophies, the financial awards, the photographs with celebrities and politicians, suddenly seemed hollow, artifacts of an identity he no longer recognized. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Diana Hammerschmidt entered without waiting for an invitation. That was quite a performance, she said, studying him with shrewd eyes. Not a performance, Reed replied, placing Richard's journal carefully in his briefcase. A realization. Diana circled the office, running her fingers along the edge of the desk. My father always said there were two kinds of people in finance. Those who see it as a way to build something meaningful, and those who see it merely as a game to win. He believed you were the former. I convinced him he was wrong. Reed closed his briefcase. Your father was a wise man. I should have listened to him more. And now, Diana challenged, am I supposed to believe that losing your company has miraculously transformed you into the man my father thought you could be? No, Reed said quietly, but it has forced me to see who I've become. What happens next is up to me. Diana watched him thoughtfully. Juliet never wanted to destroy you, you know. She wanted to save what could be saved, of the company, of you. I know that now, Reed admitted. Too late, probably. That depends, Diana replied cryptically. On what? On whether you're actually capable of change or just adapting your strategy to new circumstances. She moved toward the door, then paused. By the way, your contribution to the Ethics Foundation has been accepted. You start next month as an unpaid advisor reporting directly to Juliet. Reed stared at her, processing the implications. She agreed to this? It was her idea, Diana said, allowing herself a small smile. Perhaps she still sees something in you worth salvaging. As Diana left, Reed sat heavily in what was no longer his chair, overwhelmed by the prospect of working under Juliet's direction. The wife he had sidelined, dismissed, and betrayed would now be his boss. The irony was almost too perfect. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Meredith Whitfield spotted boarding flight to Cayman Islands. Tracking digital footprint. Will advise. E. Elias Fletcher. Still monitoring the situation apparently, and now reaching out directly. Before Reed could process this unexpected development, another message arrived. Roof terrace, 20 minutes. Come alone. J. Reed's heart raced as he read and reread the text from Juliet. After days of silence, she was finally willing to speak with him. He didn't know whether to expect reconciliation or the final twist of the knife. The company's roof terrace, where they had held their engagement party 16 years ago, was deserted when Reed arrived. The Chicago skyline stretched before him, a vista of power and possibility that had once defined his ambitions. I wasn't sure you'd come, said Juliet's voice behind him. Reed turned to find his wife standing by the elevator, wearing a simple blue dress that echoed the color of her eyes. She looked both familiar and somehow changed, as if the woman who had stood in his shadow for years had finally stepped into her own light. I would have understood if you never wanted to see me again, Reed said honestly. Part of me didn't, Juliet admitted, moving to stand beside him at the railing. But we have unfinished business. The divorce, Reed nodded, his throat tightening unexpectedly. No, Juliet said, surprising him. Meredith Whitfield. She handed him a tablet displaying a complex web of transactions. Money moving through shell companies, offshore accounts, digital currencies. She's after more than just revenge, Reed. She's systematically draining every account connected to your personal holdings, the ones not covered by the settlement agreement. Reed studied the data, his financial expertise quickly grasping the implications. This is sophisticated, professional. Because she's not working alone, Juliet said grimly. We believe she's partnered with James Cantwell. The name hit Reed like a physical blow. James Cantwell, Richard's former partner, who had left Whitfield Financial before Reed joined the firm. The man Reed had systematically discredited and driven to bankruptcy during his takeover. But that was 15 years ago, Reed protested. He disappeared after the SEC investigation. He disappeared from public view, Juliet corrected. Not from the industry. He's been operating through proxies, building a network of financial operatives specializing in corporate sabotage. Meredith is just his latest recruit. Reed's mind raced, connecting dots he should have seen long ago. The SEC investigation into Whitfield Investments, was that Cantwell too? No, Juliet said firmly. That was me. But Cantwell saw an opportunity in the chaos and activated Meredith. This goes beyond our personal issues, Reed. If Cantwell succeeds, he won't just ruin you, he'll potentially crash the entire Hammerschmidt-Whitfield entity. Why are you telling me this? Reed asked, genuinely confused. You've won, I've signed everything over. Why risk everything to protect me now? Juliet's eyes met his, clear and direct. Because despite everything, I meant my vows, and because this isn't just about you anymore. It's about protecting something bigger than either of us. She held out her hand, offering something Reed never expected to receive again, a chance at redemption, not through words, but through action. Will you help us stop them? She asked. Reed took her hand, feeling as though he was signing a new kind of contract, one based not on power or possession, but on a shared purpose that transcended their broken marriage. Yes, he said simply. As they stood together on the rooftop, Reed felt a strange sense of liberation. He had lost his company, his reputation, and likely his marriage. But in that moment of absolute loss, he had found something unexpected, the chance to be the man Richard Whitfield had once believed he could be. The moment was shattered by the sound of Juliet's phone ringing. Her expression changed as she answered it, shifting from tentative hope to alarm. "When?" she demanded, her knuckles whitening around the phone. "Are you sure?" She ended the call, turning to Reed with urgency in her eyes. "What is it?" he asked. "Cantwell isn't just after your assets," she said, her voice tight with controlled panic. "He's made his move against the company. The automated trading systems have been compromised. They're executing a coordinated sell-off that will trigger a cascade of margin calls." Reed grasped the implications immediately. If successful, such an attack could not only crash Hammerschmidt Whitfield's stock, but potentially trigger wider market instability. "How long do we have?" "Minutes," Juliet replied, already moving toward the elevator. "The fail-safes have been triggered, but someone needs to manually override the system from the central terminal." "Diana? Montgomery?" "Out of reach. They're at the SEC headquarters finalizing the merger paperwork." The elevator doors opened, and they stepped inside together. "I need access to the trading floor," Reed said, his mind already racing through protocols and counters to the attack. Juliet handed him her security badge. "You'll have full access, but Reed, once this is over, no matter what happens—" "I know," he said quietly. "This doesn't change anything between us." The elevator descended toward the trading floor, where Reed would face not just Cantwell's attack on the company, but the ultimate test of his own transformation. Was his newfound clarity genuine, or merely another tactical adaptation? As the doors opened onto the chaotic trading floor, alarms blaring and traders shouting over one another, Reed stepped forward into what felt like both an ending and a beginning. The trading floor erupted in shock as Reed Whitfield strode through the doors. For a moment the chaos paused, dozens of traders frozen in disbelief at the sight of their disgraced former CEO, moving with decisive purpose across the room. "Sir, you can't be here," a security guard called, moving to intercept him. Reed held up Juliet's badge without breaking stride. "Override authorization. We have a level 1 breach." Screens across the trading floor flashed red, displaying cascading sell orders being executed across multiple platforms. The automated systems were dumping massive blocks of Hammerschmidt Whitfield stock, triggering algorithmic responses from other firms' trading systems. "What the hell is happening?" demanded Sophia Chen, the head trader who had replaced Reed's hand-picked lieutenant after the management change. "Coordinated attack," Reed explained, scanning the room for the master terminal. "Someone's hijacked the automated trading protocols. We need to initiate a manual override before they trigger a market-wide sell-off." Sophia's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "And we're supposed to trust you? After everything that's happened?" "No," Juliet interjected, stepping forward. "You're supposed to trust me, and right now, Reed is the only person who knows how to stop this." The room fell silent, all eyes moving between Juliet and Reed. For 15 years, these traders had witnessed Reed's ruthless business practices alongside his undeniable financial brilliance. They had also seen how he had relegated his wife to the background, treating her as nothing more than an attractive ornament at company functions. Now, she stood as his equal, perhaps even his superior, and was vouching for him in the midst of crisis. Sophia hesitated only a moment before nodding. "The master terminal is locked down in Protocol Room B. Only board-level access can engage the override." "My codes won't work anymore," Reed said, looking to Juliet. She was already moving toward the secure room at the far end of the trading floor. "I have temporary override authority until the new management structure is finalized." As they hurried across the floor, Reed's phone buzzed with an incoming text. "You can't stop this. 15 years too late." J.C. James Cantwell was watching, aware of their counterattack. "How did they get into the system?" Reed asked, as Juliet pressed her palm against the biometric scanner. "We think Meredith installed backdoor access during her time here," Juliet explained, as the secure door hissed open. "She had high-level permissions thanks to your personal relationship." The barb landed, but Reed let it pass. He deserved far worse. Inside Protocol Room B, 3 massive screens displayed the full extent of the attack. It wasn't just Hammerschmidt Whitfield stock being dumped. The hackers had initiated a complex chain of transactions designed to create a market panic. Sell orders, short positions and options plays were executing simultaneously, all calibrated to maximize damage. Reed slid into the chair before the main terminal, fingers flying across the keyboard as he assessed the situation. 15 years as CEO had made him intimately familiar with every aspect of the firm's trading systems. including the emergency protocols that were now their only hope. "They've locked out the standard override commands," he muttered, scanning through lines of code. "We need to go deeper. Access the kernel directly." Juliet leaned over his shoulder, her perfume momentarily distracting him. "Can you do it?" "Yes," Reed said, his confidence genuine. "But I need your authentication codes. All of them." Their eyes met, the moment heavy with significance. Reed was asking Juliet to trust him with complete access to the system, the same man who had betrayed her trust repeatedly over the course of their marriage. Without hesitation, she took the keyboard, typing in a series of complex codes before sliding it back to him. "Thank you," he said quietly, understanding the weight of her decision. "Just stop them," she replied, her voice steady. Reed's focus narrowed to the screen before him, the outside world falling away as he engaged in digital combat with Cantwell's team. It was like playing speed chess against a grandmaster, each move anticipated and countered, the stakes escalating with every exchange. Outside the sealed room, the situation on the trading floor deteriorated. The market was responding to the massive sell-off, other stocks beginning to tumble in sympathy. On the screens visible through the glass walls, CNBC reporters were already speculating about a possible market correction triggered by instability at Hammersmith Whitfield. Inside, Reed worked methodically through the system's architecture, searching for vulnerabilities he could exploit to regain control. "There," he said suddenly, pointing to an anomalous pattern in the code. "They're routing all commands through an external server. If I can isolate that connection and sever it..." His fingers danced across the keyboard, engaging in the financial equivalent of neurosurgery. One wrong move could accelerate the damage rather than stop it. Juliet watched in silence, struck by the intensity of Reed's concentration. This was the man she had fallen in love with years ago. Brilliant, focused, unstoppable when challenged, before ambition and arrogance had corrupted him. "I've got it," Reed announced after several tense minutes. "I can block their access, but I need to execute a counter-trade to stabilize the price. It's going to require liquidating some of the firm's long-term holdings." "Do it," Juliet authorized without hesitation. Reed initiated the sequence, flooding the market with buy orders to counteract the artificial selling pressure. The terminal hummed as billions of dollars moved at his command, a stark reminder of the immense power he had once wielded daily. As the first countermeasures took effect, his phone buzzed again. "Impressive. But check your personal accounts. While you save the company, I'm taking everything else." J.C. Reed handed the phone to Juliet, his expression grim. "He's diverting attention." The attack on the trading system was just one prong of their strategy. Juliet quickly made a call. "Elias, they're moving on Reed's personal accounts. Can you block them?" She listened briefly. "Understood. Keep me posted." "Fletcher is helping protect my assets?" Reed asked, genuinely surprised. "He has resources we need," Juliet replied neutrally. "And he understands that this goes beyond personal vendettas now." On the main screen, the market was beginning to stabilize, the panic selling slowing as Reed's countermeasures took effect. But they weren't out of danger yet. "They're adapting," Reed noted, watching new patterns emerge in the attack code. "Rerouting through different servers. Cantwell always was a stubborn bastard." "Can you stop it?" "Not alone," Reed admitted. "We need more processing power to close all the back doors simultaneously." Juliet made another call. "Camilla, we need Fletcher Technologies' cybersecurity team patched in directly to Protocol Room B, highest priority." Within minutes, a secure video conference initialized on the third screen, revealing Elias Fletcher and his team of specialists. "Reed," Elias nodded coolly. "Juliet has explained the situation. My team is at your disposal." Reed swallowed his pride, prioritizing the crisis at hand over the complicated emotions Elias's involvement stirred. "Thank you. We need to coordinate a multi-point defense to close all access simultaneously." For the next 20 minutes, Reed worked in seamless coordination with Fletcher's team, his intimate knowledge of Whitfield's systems complementing their advanced cybersecurity expertise. Gradually, they sealed the breaches one by one, securing the perimeter against further attacks. As the immediate threat to the trading system receded, Reed turned his attention to tracking the source of the attack. "They're bouncing the signal through multiple servers," he observed, "but there's a pattern to it. All the traffic is ultimately routing through the Cayman Islands." "Where Meredith was headed," Juliet noted. "It's too obvious," Reed said, frowning. Cantwell wouldn't be that sloppy unless... He stopped abruptly, a new realization dawning. It's a diversion. He wants us looking at offshore accounts while the real attack comes from somewhere else. Reed pulled up a map of all Whitfield Investments' global network connections, scanning for anomalies. His eyes fixed on an unusual data pattern flowing through their Chicago backup server, located in the same building where they now stood. "They're here," he said quietly. "In the building. The server room on the 42nd floor." Juliet immediately contacted security, ordering a team to the location. Reed watched the surveillance feed on his tablet as armed guards converged on the server room, only to find it empty. "I don't understand," Juliet said, frustration evident in her voice. "If they're not physically present, how are they accessing the backup server?" Reed's expression darkened as the final piece clicked into place. "They don't need to be there now. Someone with physical access planted a device earlier. Someone who had legitimate reason to visit the server room." "Meredith," Juliet concluded. "No," Reed said, his voice hollow. "Not Meredith." He pulled up the server room access logs, confirming his suspicion. The last authorized access before the attack began was 12 hours earlier. The name on the log, Victor Stein. Juliet stared at the screen in disbelief. "Victor? But he's been with the company for 20 years. He was Richard's hire, not yours." "Which made him the perfect mole," Reed said bitterly. "No one would suspect Richard's trusted lieutenant." He typed rapidly, isolating the specific connection linked to the device in the server room. With a decisive keystroke, he severed it, cutting off the final avenue of attack. The screen stabilized, the market returning to normal parameters as the crisis subsided. In the sudden quiet of the protocol room, Reed and Juliet exchanged a look of cautious relief. "We need to find Victor," Juliet said. "He'll be long gone," Reed replied. "But we can still track the money flows. If we move quickly enough, we might be able to recover." The door to the protocol room slid open, revealing Victor Stein standing in the entrance, a 9mm pistol held casually at his side. "I wouldn't bother," Victor said calmly. "Those funds are already beyond your reach." Reed slowly rose from his chair, positioning himself between Victor and Juliet. "Why, Victor? After everything we built together." "Built?" Victor laughed incredulously. "You really believe that, don't you? That we built something valuable?" He stepped further into the room, keeping the gun trained on Reed. "We built a house of cards, Reed. A monument to greed disguised as financial innovation. And you didn't even see who was helping you do it." "Cantwell," Reed said, understanding dawning. "You've been working with him from the beginning." "James recognized Richard's genius long before you appeared," Victor confirmed. "When you orchestrated your hostile takeover, forcing Richard out of his own company while he was dying of cancer, James vowed to destroy you. But he needed someone on the inside. And you volunteered," Juliet said, her voice tight with anger. Victor's expression softened slightly as he looked at her. "I'm truly sorry, Juliet. You were never supposed to be collateral damage. I actually tried to protect you over the years." "By helping dismantle my father's legacy," she challenged. "By ensuring there would be something left to salvage when Reed inevitably self-destructed," Victor countered. "Which he finally has." Reed's mind raced, calculating angles, options, risks. Victor had always been methodical, never impulsive. The fact that he had shown himself now, gun in hand, meant this was the endgame he had planned for years. "So what happens now?" Reed asked, subtly shifting his weight to maintain balance. "You shoot us both and disappear with the money? Seems sloppy for you, Victor." "Nothing so dramatic," Victor replied. "The gun is merely insurance to ensure you don't interfere with the final phase of the transfer. In approximately 3 minutes, the last of your personal assets will be relocated to accounts you cannot trace or recover. You'll be left with nothing but this hollow victory of saving a company that is no longer yours." He checked his watch. "Once that's complete, I'll leave quietly. The security cameras in this section have been disabled, and I have an exit route that bypasses the main lobby." What Victor didn't know was that during their conversation, Reed had been typing a sequence of commands behind his back, activating an emergency protocol he had built into the system years earlier, one that even Juliet didn't know about. "I underestimated you," Reed admitted, buying time as the protocol initialized. "All these years I thought you were just risk-averse. I never imagined you were playing a longer game than mine." "That was your greatest weakness," Victor said. "You could never see beyond the next quarter, the next deal. You built a fortune, but never an enduring legacy. Like you and Cantwell have, Reed challenged. Stealing money makes you what? Righteous thieves? Victor's expression hardened. We're returning what was stolen. Richard Whitfield's innovations, his client relationships, his approach to wealth management. You took it all and corrupted it into a money-grabbing machine. Now that machine will break down, piece by piece. Behind them, the terminal emitted a soft beep, signaling the completion of Reed's hidden protocol. Victor's attention flickered toward the sound. What did you do? He demanded, raising the gun. Something you taught me, actually, Reed replied calmly. Always have a backup plan. On the main screen, a new window appeared, displaying a complex web of transactions. Victor's own carefully concealed financial network, suddenly exposed and frozen. Dead man's switch, Reed explained. If anyone ever held me at gunpoint in this room, the system would automatically locate and lock down their financial footprint. Paranoid, I know, but it turns out, not without reason. Victor's face drained of color as he watched his carefully constructed financial escape route disintegrate before his eyes. You can still shoot us, Reed acknowledged, but the money is already beyond your reach. Every account, every shell company, every offshore trust, frozen and flagged for regulatory review. For a moment, the room was perfectly still, the three of them locked in a tableau of betrayal and consequence. Then Victor lowered the gun, his shoulders sagging in defeat. 15 years, he said quietly. 15 years of watching you destroy everything Richard built, of watching you discard principles for profit, of watching you treat Juliet like an afterthought. He turned to Juliet, his expression softening. He doesn't deserve your help, or your loyalty. This isn't about what Reed deserves, Juliet replied evenly. It's about protecting what matters. The company, its employees, its clients. Something my father understood even if Reed forgot it along the way. Security guards burst into the room, alerted by the protocol Reed had activated. As they took Victor into custody, he looked back at Reed one last time. You haven't won, he said with quiet certainty. You've lost everything that matters. As Victor was led away, Reed and Juliet stood in silence, the aftermath of crisis settling around them. The trading floor beyond the glass walls had returned to normal operations. The panic subsided, the immediate danger averted, but between them, nothing was resolved. Thank you, Juliet said finally, for stopping them. Thank you for trusting me to try, Reed replied, even after everything I've done. Their eyes met, the moment heavy with unspoken words. 15 years of marriage, of shared history, of gradual estrangement hung in the balance. This doesn't change things between us, Juliet said quietly, echoing his words from earlier. I know, Reed acknowledged, the full weight of his loss finally settling on him. He had saved the company but lost his wife, his closest friend, and any illusion that his success had been honorably achieved. As they exited the protocol room together, Reed felt a strange sense of clarity. For the first time in 15 years, he saw himself not as the brilliant financier who had conquered Chicago's financial world, but as the man who had sacrificed everything of true value for the hollow triumph of wealth and status. What will you do now? Juliet asked as they stepped into the elevator. Honor our agreement, Reed replied. Step away from the company. Work with the Ethics Foundation if you'll still have me. Try to rebuild something. Not us, I know that's gone, but maybe some version of the man your father thought I could be. The elevator descended in silence, carrying them away from the crisis they had faced together and toward the uncertain future they would navigate separately. As the doors opened onto the main lobby, Elias Fletcher was waiting, his expression inscrutable as he took in the sight of Reed and Juliet emerging together. It's over, Juliet confirmed. Victor was the inside man. He's been working with Cantwell all along. Elias nodded, his eyes moving to Reed. Impressive work. You saved a lot of people from financial ruin today. Too little, too late, Reed replied, the bitterness in his voice directed at himself rather than Elias. Perhaps, Elias acknowledged, or perhaps it's exactly on time. Before Reed could ask what he meant, Diana Hammerschmidt strode through the main doors, flanked by Judge Montgomery and a team of lawyers. Their timing was too perfect to be coincidental. You knew, Reed said to Juliet. You expected Cantwell to move today. We suspected, she confirmed. The SEC paperwork finalizing the merger was the trigger he was waiting for. One last chance to destroy everything before the new security protocols were implemented. Diana approached, her sharp eyes taking in the situation immediately. "I see we missed the excitement. The crisis is averted. Thanks to Reed," Juliet said, the acknowledgement clearly surprising Diana. He identified Victor Stein as Cantwell's operative and stopped the attack. Diana studied Reed with new interest. Did he now? How unexpectedly heroic. Not heroic, Reed corrected. Necessary. I helped create this vulnerability by trusting the wrong people and emphasizing growth over security. It was my responsibility to help fix it. The simple honesty of his statement seemed to affect Diana more than any elaborate explanation could have. She exchanged a significant look with Judge Montgomery before turning back to Reed. "Well, Mr. Whitfield, it seems we may need to reconsider certain aspects of our arrangement." Reed shook his head. "No need. I'll honor the terms as agreed. The company is better off in new hands." "Even if those hands might still benefit from your expertise," Diana pressed. "Not as CEO, of course, but perhaps in an advisory capacity more substantial than we originally discussed." Reed looked to Juliet, searching for her reaction. This was her victory, her vindication. He wouldn't accept anything that diminished that. "That would be Juliet's decision," he said firmly. "It's her foundation, her vision." The lobby fell silent, all eyes turning to Juliet, who stood straight-backed and composed, every inch Richard Whitfield's daughter and heir. "I'll consider it," she said finally. "But not today. Today has been complicated enough." As the group dispersed to deal with the aftermath of Victor's arrest and the thwarted attack, Reed found himself alone in the lobby of the building that had once been the center of his world. Through the glass doors, he could see Chicago stretching before him, the same city, the same buildings, but somehow transformed by his altered perspective. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unexpected source. "My office. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. We have unfinished business." J. Reed stared at the message from Juliet, uncertain whether it promised reconciliation, further reckoning, or something else entirely. Whatever tomorrow brought, he knew one thing with absolute clarity. The man who walked into her office would not be the same one who had taken everything for granted just days ago. The price of his ambition had been nearly total. What remained to be seen was whether anything of value could be salvaged from the wreckage of the life he had so carefully and blindly constructed. Reed arrived at Juliet's office precisely at 9 the following morning. The Ethics Foundation occupied the entire 38th floor of a sleek building overlooking Millennium Park, a space Reed had never visited, despite providing the initial funding as a tax write-off years earlier. "Mr. Whitfield," greeted Camila Rodriguez from behind a minimalist reception desk. "Mrs. Whitfield is expecting you." The Mrs. struck Reed with unexpected force, a reminder that despite everything, they remained legally married, connected by a contract neither had yet moved to dissolve. Camilla led him through an open workspace where a dozen young professionals were already engaged in their morning tasks. They glanced up as Reed passed, their expressions ranging from curiosity to thinly veiled hostility. His reputation had clearly preceded him. Juliet's office stood in stark contrast to Reed's former domain at Whitfield Investments, where his had been designed to intimidate. Dark woods, leather, commanding views, hers invited conversation. Floor-to-ceiling windows flooded the space with natural light, illuminating walls adorned with works by Chicago artists rather than financial trophies. She stood as he entered, her posture conveying the quiet confidence that had always been there, but that Reed had somehow failed to truly see until recently. "Thank you for coming," she said, gesturing to a seating area rather than positioning herself behind her desk. Reed took a seat, noting the absence of the power dynamics he had unconsciously enforced in his own office for years. "I wasn't sure what this meeting was about," he admitted. "Several things," Juliet replied, sitting across from him. "First, an update. Victor has been cooperating with federal investigators. He's provided evidence that James Cantwell orchestrated the entire scheme, including placing Meredith in your company." "And Meredith, still in the Caymans, but her accounts have been frozen. It's only a matter of time before she's extradited." Reed nodded, accepting the information without emotion. "And the company? Recovering. The market has stabilized, and Diana has been remarkably effective at reassuring key clients." Juliet paused. "Your counterattack was crucial. Without your intervention, the damage would have been catastrophic." It was the least I could do, considering my role in creating the vulnerability. Juliet studied him, her blue eyes searching his face. That's precisely what I wanted to discuss, your role, both in what happened and in what comes next. She rose, moving to a sideboard where a carafe of water and 2 glasses waited. As she poured, Reed noticed a small object on her desk. Richard Whitfield's old pocket watch, which he had always carried, but which Reed had relegated to a drawer after his death. Diana and Judge Montgomery have proposed a revised arrangement, Juliet continued, handing Reed a glass. They believe your expertise would be valuable during the transition, particularly in light of your actions yesterday. And what do you believe? Reed asked quietly. Juliet returned to her seat, taking a moment to organize her thoughts. I believe you're at a crossroads, Reed. For 15 years you've defined yourself by what you could acquire, control, and dominate. Now that's been stripped away. She leaned forward slightly. The question is, who are you without those external markers of success? Is there anything left of the man my father saw potential in? The man I married? The directness of her question cut through Reed's usual defenses. In the aftermath of his public downfall and Victor's betrayal, he had asked himself the same thing during a sleepless night. I don't know, he answered honestly. For so long I measured my worth by the size of my deals, the growth of the company, the envy of my competitors. Without that, I'm not sure what remains. Then perhaps that's what you need to discover, Juliet suggested, before either of us makes any decisions about the future. What are you proposing? A sabbatical, 3 months away from Chicago, from the financial world, from the identity you've constructed. She handed him a folder that had been waiting on the coffee table between them. There's a property in northern Michigan that belonged to my father, a cabin on Lake Superior. Simple, isolated, but comfortable. I think you should go there. Reed opened the folder to find photographs of a modest but well-built cabin overlooking the vast expanse of Lake Superior. It looked peaceful, contemplative, and utterly unlike anywhere he would normally choose to spend time. To do what exactly? He asked, genuinely perplexed. To figure out who Reed Whitfield is when he's not making deals or conquering markets, Juliet replied. To determine if there's anything beneath the persona you've created worth salvaging. Reed closed the folder, considering the proposal. And after these 3 months, if you choose to return, Diana and Judge Montgomery are willing to consider a consulting role with significant restrictions and oversight. The Ethics Foundation would also welcome your input, assuming your perspective has evolved. And us? Reed asked, voicing the question that hung unspoken between them. Is there any path forward there? Juliet's expression softened slightly, revealing a complexity of emotion beneath her composed exterior. I don't know, Reed. 15 years isn't erased in a moment of crisis, for better or worse. What I do know is that I can't make any decisions about our future until I understand who you're becoming, until you understand it yourself. Reed nodded slowly, a strange sense of rightness settling over him. When would I leave? Today, if possible. The cabin is ready, and your continued presence in Chicago is complicated for everyone right now. And you? What will you be doing while I'm contemplating my existence beside a lake, running the foundation, helping rebuild Hammerschmidt Whitfield's reputation, living my life? A small smile touched her lips, getting reacquainted with the woman I was before I became Mrs. Reed Whitfield. Reed stood, taking the folder with him. I'll go. Not because I expect it will save our marriage or my career, but because you're right. I need to understand who I am beyond those things. As he moved toward the door, Juliet called after him. Reed, there's something else you should know. He turned back to find her holding out a slim volume bound in faded leather. Richard Whitfield's journal, the one Reed had kept but never truly read. Take this with you, she said. My father saw something in you once, something worth believing in, worth nurturing. Maybe his words can help you rediscover whatever that was. Reed accepted the journal, their fingers briefly touching in the exchange. Thank you. 3 months, Reed, Juliet said softly. No contact, no business calls, no financial news. Just you, the lake, and whatever you find within yourself there. And then? And then we'll see. As Reed left the foundation offices, Chicago's financial district bustled around him, bankers and traders rushing to meetings, deals being made, fortunes rising and falling. For 15 years, this had been the ecosystem in which he had thrived, the terrain he had conquered. Now he observed it as if from a distance, already feeling detached from its rhythms and imperatives. His phone buzzed with notifications, emails, texts, news alerts about Whitfield Investments' stock recovery, Victor's arrest, Reed's own uncertain future. With a decisive movement, he shut it off completely and hailed a taxi to his penthouse. 3 hours later, Reed stood in the expansive foyer of the lakefront condominium he had purchased as a trophy rather than a home. Suitcases packed with casual clothes he rarely wore waited by the door. He had left instructions with his attorney regarding essential matters requiring attention during his absence, but had otherwise severed the connections that had defined his daily existence. As he prepared to leave, the elevator doors opened to reveal Elias Fletcher. "Going somewhere?" Elias asked, taking in the luggage. "Michigan," Reed replied, too exhausted for pretense. "Juliet's suggestion." Elias nodded thoughtfully. "The cabin on Superior, good choice." Reed's eyes narrowed slightly. "You know it?" "Richard took me there once, years ago, when I was just starting Fletcher Technologies. Said it was where he went to remember what mattered." Elias crossed the foyer, his posture relaxed but purposeful. "I won't keep you. Just wanted to deliver this in person." He handed Reed a sealed envelope. "Financial intelligence my team gathered on Cantwell's operation. Thought you should know the full scope of what you were up against." Reed accepted the envelope with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. "Why give this to me now when I'm walking away from everything?" "Because despite our differences, I respected Richard Whitfield immensely, and he believed in you." Elias moved back toward the elevator. "Consider it context for your contemplation." As the elevator doors closed, Reed stared at the envelope, tempted to open it immediately. Instead, he placed it in his briefcase alongside Richard's journal, both to be examined when he reached the isolation of the cabin. The drive north took 6 hours, Chicago's urban density gradually giving way to the rolling countryside of southern Wisconsin, and then the dense forests of Michigan's Upper Peninsula. With each mile, Reed felt layers of his carefully constructed identity peeling away: CEO, financial titan, manipulator of markets, betrayed husband, disgraced leader. By the time he turned onto the unmarked dirt road leading to the cabin, he wasn't entirely sure who remained behind those titles. The cabin itself was exactly as the photos had shown, rustic but well-maintained, perched on a bluff overlooking the vastness of Lake Superior. As Reed unlocked the door and stepped inside, he was struck by the simplicity of the space. No luxury amenities, no expensive art, no status symbols. Just comfortable furniture, well-worn books and windows framing the eternal meeting of water and sky. On the kitchen table sat a single sheet of paper with Juliet's handwriting. The pantry is stocked. Firewood is on the porch. Internet is intentionally absent. The nearest town is 20 miles south if you need supplies. Cell reception is spotty at best. Time moves differently here. Let it. J. Reed placed the note carefully back on the table, then moved to the porch overlooking the lake. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the water, painting the surface with streaks of gold and crimson. The vastness of Superior stretched to the horizon, making even Reed Whitfield, who had commanded billions of dollars and the attention of financial markets, feel appropriately small. For the first time in years, perhaps decades, he had nowhere to be, no one to impress, no deal to close, no enemy to outmaneuver. The silence was deafening. That night, after building a fire in the stone hearth, Reed finally opened Elias Fletcher's envelope. Inside were documents detailing James Cantwell's 15-year campaign of revenge, a meticulously orchestrated plan that had begun the moment Reed forced Richard Whitfield out of his own company. The evidence was damning not of Cantwell, but of Reed himself. Page after page documented how his own actions, his arrogance, his ruthlessness, his willingness to discard people after using them, had created the perfect environment for Cantwell's scheme to flourish. Victor's betrayal, Meredith's infiltration, the SEC investigation, all were responses to seeds Reed had planted years earlier. One document particularly struck him, a psychological profile Cantwell had commissioned on Reed early in the campaign. It described him as pathologically focused on external validation, incapable of recognizing the intrinsic value of relationships, and vulnerable to manipulation through his own belief in his superiority. Reed read the assessment multiple times, recognition dawning with each repetition. The profile described not just his professional persona, but the core operating system of his identity, the patterns that had driven him to success, while simultaneously setting the stage for his downfall. He set the documents aside and picked up Richard Whitfield's journal, opening to a random entry from 17 years earlier. Had dinner with Reed Whitfield tonight. Brilliant young man with an extraordinary mind for finance, but I worry about his hunger. He sees the chess moves but not the people making them. I recognize the ambition. It reminds me of myself at his age, before Catherine and Juliet taught me what truly matters. Perhaps mentoring him will provide the guidance I never had. There's goodness in him, beneath the drive and calculation. I saw it in how he spoke about creating security for families, about building something that lasts. The question is whether that goodness will survive his ascent, or be sacrificed to it. Reed closed the journal, a tightness in his chest making it difficult to breathe. Richard had seen him clearly, both his potential and his fatal flaws, and had chosen to believe in the former despite the latter. In the days that followed, Reed established a simple routine at the cabin. Mornings were spent on the porch with coffee, watching the lake's changing moods. Afternoons were for physical tasks, chopping wood, making minor repairs to the cabin, hiking the surrounding trails. Evenings were devoted to reading Richard's journal chronologically, tracing the man's thoughts from Reed's arrival at his company through his final days. A week into his exile, Reed drove into the small town of Whitefish Bay for supplies. At the general store, the elderly proprietor chatted amiably, asking if Reed was another city fella coming up to find himself. Something like that, Reed acknowledged with a small smile. Richard Whitfield's cabin, right? The man asked, surprising Reed. Used to come in here a couple times a month when he stayed there. Good man, Richard. Always asked about my granddaughter's college plans, remembered them from visit to visit. You knew him well? Well enough to know he valued this place, the owner replied, bagging Reed's groceries. Said it reminded him what the money was for. Never quite understood that myself, not having enough to forget. Reed considered this as he drove back to the cabin, the old man's words echoing in his mind. What the money was for. Had Reed ever truly asked himself that question? Or had accumulating wealth and power become an end in itself, divorced from any meaningful purpose? 2 weeks into his sabbatical, Reed received his first and only visitor. He was splitting logs on the side yard when a rental car pulled up the dirt driveway. Judge Montgomery emerged, looking oddly natural in casual clothes despite his usual formal courtroom attire. Productive therapy, Montgomery observed, nodding toward the split wood. Richard swore by it. Reed set down the axe, wiping sweat from his brow. I didn't expect visitors. Juliet doesn't know I'm here, Montgomery assured him. This is between us. May I? Reed gestured toward the porch where 2 Adirondack chairs faced the lake. As they settled into the chairs, Montgomery produced a flask from his jacket pocket. 15-year-old Scotch, he explained, offering it to Reed. Seemed appropriate. Reed accepted a small sip before passing it back. Why are you here, Harold? Montgomery took his time answering, gazing out at the lake. I've known 3 generations of Whitfields now. Watched them build, lose, and rebuild. I've seen the best and worst of what wealth and power can do to a person's character. He turned to Reed. I wanted to see for myself if there's anything left of the young man Richard believed in, the one he hoped would love his daughter and honor his legacy. And your verdict? Reed asked, meeting the older man's shrewd gaze. Still deliberating, Montgomery replied with a small smile, but I'm encouraged that you've lasted 2 weeks without fleeing back to civilization. Richard only made it 3 days his first time here. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching an osprey circle over the lake before diving for fish. Did you know? Reed finally asked. About Victor working with Cantwell from the beginning? I suspected someone close to you was feeding information, Montgomery admitted. But no, I didn't know it was Victor until recently. That's the problem with long cons. They require such compartmentalization that even the players don't know the full game. Including me, Reed said quietly. I thought I was the one moving the pieces, but I was just another piece being moved. Montgomery studied him thoughtfully. That realization, that we're all simultaneously players and played, is the beginning of wisdom, Reed. The question is, what you do with it. And what does your wisdom suggest I do? Keep chopping wood, Montgomery said simply. Keep reading Richard's journal. Keep sitting with the uncomfortable truth that the empire you built was constructed on a foundation others laid, some of whom you never properly acknowledged. He rose to leave, but paused beside Reed's chair. For what it's worth, I think Richard would be pleased to see you here. He believed in redemption more than retribution. It's why he made sure this place would eventually come back to you." Reed looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "The cabin," Montgomery clarified. "Richard left it to Juliet with specific instructions that if you ever reached a point of genuine reckoning, it should pass to you. He called it his investment in Reed's humanity, the one asset he believed would eventually yield returns when all others had been exhausted." With that parting revelation, Montgomery departed, leaving Reed to contemplate this unexpected inheritance, not just of property but of faith stretching beyond the grave. As the weeks passed, Reed delved deeper into Richard's journal, discovering entries he had overlooked during his initial reading. One passage, written during Richard's final months, struck particularly deep. "Reed believes my illness has clouded my judgment about the Anderson deal. Perhaps it has, but not in the way he thinks. Facing mortality clarifies priorities with brutal efficiency. I can no longer justify sacrificing what matters for marginal financial gain. Reed sees my insistence on protecting the jobs of loyal employees as sentimentality. He cannot yet understand that the balance sheet of a life well lived includes assets that never appear in quarterly reports. I pray that someday, before it's too late, he will learn what took me too long to recognize, that success without integrity is merely achievement, and achievement without purpose is ultimately hollow." The words haunted Reed, forcing him to confront the truth about how he had transformed Richard's company after his death, stripping away the human considerations that had been central to its founder's vision in pursuit of ever-increasing profits. In the quiet of the cabin, far from the validation and distractions of his former life, Reed began the painful process of honest self-examination. He traced the decisions that had led him here, not just the recent ones that had precipitated his downfall, but the pattern established years earlier of prioritizing success over principle, achievement over connection, acquisition over appreciation. Midway through the second month, Reed established a new ritual. Each evening, he wrote letters he never intended to send to Richard, apologizing for betraying his vision, to Victor, acknowledging the legitimate grievances beneath his betrayal, to Meredith, accepting responsibility for creating an environment where manipulation thrived, and most painfully to Juliet, confronting the 1,000 small betrayals that had preceded the final ones. "I failed to see you," he wrote in one such letter. "Not just as my wife, but as a person of substance and vision in your own right. I reduced you to an accessory in my narrative rather than recognizing you as the protagonist of your own. Perhaps that is the gravest sin of all, not seeing the full humanity in those closest to us." As the third month began, Reed felt a shift within himself, not a dramatic transformation, but a quieting of the constant need for validation and control that had driven him for decades. The silence that had initially felt oppressive now felt cleansing. The simplicity that had seemed like deprivation now felt like clarity. One morning, as first light painted the lake in shades of pearl and silver, Reed made a decision. He would not return to Chicago when his 3 months ended, at least not immediately. The reckoning he had begun required more time, more distance from the identity he had constructed and the wreckage it had created. He drove to Whitefish Bay and called Juliet from the general store's landline, the only reliable connection to the outside world. "It's me," he said when she answered, her voice sending an unexpected wave of emotion through him. "I wanted to let you know I won't be coming back next week." A pause. "I see. Is the isolation too much?" "The opposite," Reed replied. "It's not enough yet. I need more time, Juliet, to understand who I am beyond the person I pretended to be for so long." "How much more time?" "I don't know," he answered honestly, "but I wanted to honor our agreement by telling you directly rather than just disappearing." Another pause, longer this time. "Thank you for that. Are you finding what you needed there?" Reed considered the question carefully. "Not yet, but I'm finding the courage to look for it honestly. That feels like a beginning." "Yes," Juliet agreed softly. "It does." 3 days before his original return date, Reed received a package delivered by a local courier service. Inside was a legal document transferring ownership of the cabin to him, along with a brief note from Juliet. "I'm fulfilling my father's wishes. This place is yours now for as long as you need it. I've extended your consulting consideration with Diana and Judge Montgomery indefinitely. Take the time you need, Reed. The person you're becoming deserves that space." Enclosed with the deed was a photograph Reed had never seen before. Richard Whitfield sitting on the cabin's porch, a much younger Reed beside him, both laughing at something now lost to time. On the back, Juliet had written, "He believed this man still exists." Perhaps he was right. On what would have been his final day at the cabin, Reed sat on the porch, watching a storm roll across Lake Superior, massive clouds building on the horizon, whitecaps dotting the darkening water. The wildness of it suited his mood, not the turbulent chaos of his former ambition, but something deeper, more elemental. His phone, unused for nearly 3 months, sat on the small table beside him. He had charged it that morning, curious about what he would feel when reconnecting to his former world. Now he turned it on, watching impassively as notifications flooded in, hundreds of emails, texts, missed calls, news alerts. None of it held the urgency it once would have. He scrolled briefly through the headlines. Whitfield Investments rebrands under new leadership. Victor Stein pleads guilty in financial conspiracy case. Meredith Vaughn arrested in Cayman Islands. Fletcher Technologies announces partnership with Hammerschmidt Whitfield Ethics Foundation. The last headline caught his attention. Juliet Whitfield, named CEO of Foundation, expands mission. He clicked on the article, seeing a photograph of Juliet at a podium, confident and purposeful. The story detailed her vision for transforming the foundation from a tax write-off into a genuine force for ethical reform in the financial industry. Reed set the phone down, feeling neither jealousy nor resentment at her success, only a quiet pride in the woman he had failed to truly see for so many years. As the first raindrops began to fall, Reed made his decision. He would stay through the winter, experiencing the cabin as Richard had known it in all seasons. In spring, he would return to Chicago, not to reclaim his former position or status, but to offer whatever expertise he could to Juliet's vision for the foundation. Whether their personal relationship could be rebuilt remained an open question. Some betrayals cut too deep for simple healing, and Reed had no illusions about the damage he had inflicted. But for the first time in his adult life, rebuilding his marriage was not a tactical objective or a matter of possession. It was a hope born of genuine respect and remorse. That evening, as the storm raged outside, Reed wrote one final letter to Juliet. This one to be delivered rather than consigned to the fire like the others. Juliet, for 3 months, I've lived in your father's sanctuary, confronting truths about myself I spent decades avoiding. The man who arrived here measured his worth by what he owned and controlled. The man writing to you now understands how empty those metrics truly are. I won't be returning to Chicago yet. There is more work to be done here, not on the cabin, but on the man inhabiting it. When I do return, it won't be to reclaim what I lost, but to offer what I might yet become, to causes worthy of commitment. I don't know if there's a path forward for us. Some damages can't be undone, only acknowledged and accepted. But I want you to know that whatever happens between us, I finally see you clearly. Your strength, your vision, your integrity, the qualities your father recognized and that I was too blind to appreciate. The cabin deed arrived. Please thank Judge Montgomery for his visit and his wisdom. I understand now why your father valued this place and why he wanted me to find it eventually. With respect and regret, Reed P.S. I've enclosed something I should have shared years ago. The first page of your father's journal. It belongs to you more than to me. Attached to the letter was a carefully removed page containing Richard's first entry after his cancer diagnosis. The doctors say I have months, not years. The news should devastate me, but instead I feel a strange clarity. What matters comes into such sharp focus when time becomes finite. Juliet is my greatest achievement, not this company, not my financial success. In her I see the perfect balance of determination and compassion I always strived for, but often failed to achieve. My greatest fear is not death, but leaving her vulnerable to those who cannot recognize her true worth. Reed sees her beauty, but not her brilliance. He covets her as an asset, rather than treasuring her as an equal. I can only hope that time and love will teach him what took me a lifetime to learn, that true wealth lies not in what we possess, but in what we nurture and protect. If you're reading this, Reed, know that I entrusted my most precious treasures to you, my daughter and my legacy. How you honor them will define not just your success, but your humanity. As Reed sealed the letter, thunder crashed overhead, nature's punctuation to the end of one chapter and the tentative beginning of another. Outside, Lake Superior raged against the shore, powerful and untamable. Inside, in the quiet of the cabin Richard Whitfield had loved, Reed faced the storm within himself with equal respect and humility. The empire he had built lay in ruins, but from those ruins, something more authentic might yet emerge, not a monument to ambition, but a testament to the harder, humbler work of redemption. 18 months later, snow fell gently outside the windows of the Hammerschmidt Whitfield Ethics Foundation, coating Chicago in a pristine white blanket that temporarily softened the city's hard edges. From the 38th floor, the view was magical. Skyscrapers transformed into fairy tale castles, the frozen surface of Lake Michigan stretching like a silver plain into the distance. Reed Whitfield stood at the window, watching the snow accumulate on the ledge. At 49, he looked markedly different from the man who had ruled Whitfield Investments 2 years earlier. The expensive suits remained, but the calculated intimidation was gone. His hair showed more grey now, and the lines around his eyes spoke of introspection rather than calculation. "The board approved all 3 proposals," said Juliet, entering her office with a stack of folders. "Even Henderson voted yes, which I never expected." Reed turned from the window, offering a genuine smile. "Henderson respects data. The pilot program's results were too compelling to ignore." "Your presentation helped," Juliet acknowledged, setting the folders on her desk. "You've always known how to speak their language." "I've had excellent coaching," Reed replied, his eyes meeting hers with quiet gratitude. Their professional relationship had evolved into an effective partnership over the past year. After 8 months at the cabin, Reed had returned to Chicago, not seeking to reclaim his former position, but offering his expertise to the foundation on Juliet's terms. His insider knowledge of financial manipulation had proven invaluable in developing programs to prevent the very abuses he had once exploited. Their personal relationship remained more complicated. The divorce papers, drawn up during Reed's exile, remained unsigned, neither moving forward with finalizing the separation nor actively reconciling. Instead, they existed in a careful balance of professional respect and cautious personal rediscovery. "Diana called," Juliet said, taking a seat behind her desk. "The ethics certification program is being adopted by 3 more major banks. Apparently, your reputation for knowing where the bodies are buried makes compliance officers very attentive during your workshops." Reed smiled wryly. "Poetic justice, using my former tactics to close the loopholes I once exploited." A knock at the door interrupted them. Camilla appeared with 2 cups of coffee. "Your 4 o'clock was cancelled due to the weather, Mrs. Whitfield, and Mr. Fletcher called to confirm dinner at 7, weather permitting." "Thank you, Camilla," Juliet replied. As her assistant left, Reed raised an eyebrow. "Fletcher still making his case?" Juliet met his gaze steadily. "Elias has been a good friend and supporter of the foundation. The dinner is a strategy session for the congressional testimony next month." "Of course," Reed nodded, accepting her explanation without pressing further. Whatever relationship existed between Juliet and Elias remained their business, one of many boundaries Reed had learned to respect during his reconstruction of self. Juliet studied him for a moment. "The cabin looks good with the renovations. I almost didn't recognize it when I dropped off those documents last month." "Just some necessary updates," Reed explained. "The original character is intact. I've come to appreciate Richard's vision for the place." "He would be pleased," Juliet said softly, "with the cabin and other developments." Reed nodded, understanding the weight of her words. Richard Whitfield's approval had once been something Reed dismissed as unnecessarily constraining. Now the idea that he might be honoring his mentor's legacy carried profound meaning. "I'm heading back there tomorrow," Reed said. "The quarterly review is complete, and the new certification materials don't need me on site. For the weekend, maybe longer," Reed replied. "Winter on Superior has its own kind of beauty. Stark, honest, like the man who lives there now," Juliet suggested, a hint of warmth in her voice. "Still working on that," Reed answered with genuine humility. "Some renovations take more time than others." The intercom buzzed. "Mrs. Whitfield, Judge Montgomery has arrived." "Send him in," Juliet responded. Harold Montgomery entered, bringing with him the energy that belied his advanced age. At 78, he remained sharp as ever, now serving as chairman of the foundation's board. "Reed, good to see you." Montgomery greeted him with a firm handshake. "Excellent work on the certification program." "Thank you, Harold. Your legal perspective was invaluable." Montgomery settled into a chair, his shrewd eyes moving between Reed and Juliet. "I've just come from a fascinating lunch with our old friend Victor Stein." Reed's expression registered surprise. "Victor is out. Released last week. Reduced sentence for cooperation," Montgomery explained. "He asked to see me specifically." "What did he want?" Juliet asked. "To make amends in his way," Montgomery replied. "He provided information about several offshore structures that even the federal investigators hadn't uncovered, and he asked me to give you this, Reed." Montgomery handed over a sealed envelope. Reed accepted it cautiously, turning it over in his hands. "He said it was something he should have given you 15 years ago," Montgomery added, "when Richard first became ill." Reed opened the envelope to find a handwritten letter from Richard Whitfield, dated just weeks before his death. As he read, his expression shifted from curiosity to stunned realization. "What is it?" Juliet asked. Reed looked up, his eyes meeting hers. "Your father never wanted me to push him out. He wanted to make me his successor, with you and me as equal partners in the company's future. He saw us as complementary strengths, my financial innovation balanced by your ethical foundation." He passed the letter to Juliet, watching as she read her father's words. "Victor kept this from you?" she asked, looking up with glistening eyes. "From both of us," Reed confirmed. "Richard had instructed him to deliver it if anything happened during his experimental treatment. Victor made the decision that I wasn't ready, that I would see it as weakness rather than wisdom. And he was right," Reed acknowledged after a moment of reflection. "The man I was then would have rejected the partnership model. I would have seen it as Richard lacking confidence in me, rather than recognizing the wisdom of balance." The three sat in contemplative silence, absorbing the revelation that history might have unfolded entirely differently if one letter had been delivered. "The question," Montgomery said finally, "is not what might have been, but what still could be." He rose, moving toward the door. "I'll leave you two to discuss that. The snow's getting worse and my driver gets nervous in weather." After Montgomery departed, Reed and Juliet stood at the window together, watching the snow transform Chicago into something softer, more forgiving. "Your father saw everything clearly," Reed said quietly. "What I could be at my best, what I would become at my worst." "He also saw me," Juliet replied, "not just as his daughter, but as a counterbalance to your ambition, a partnership neither of us was ready to understand." Reed turned to face her fully. "And now? Now we've both changed," Juliet said. "I found strength I didn't know I had. You found humility you never thought you needed." She held up Richard's letter. "Perhaps this is why Victor chose this moment to share it, not to rewrite the past, but to suggest a possible future." "What kind of future do you see, Juliet?" Reed asked, the question encompassing far more than their professional relationship. Juliet considered her answer carefully. "One where we honor what your ambition built, and what my principles protected, where neither of us stands in the other's shadow. Equal partners," Reed said softly, echoing Richard's vision. "In whatever capacity we decide," Juliet agreed, leaving the specific nature of that partnership undefined. A door neither closed nor fully opened, but existing as a genuine possibility. As evening settled over Chicago, they worked together in comfortable silence, occasionally sharing observations or ideas. The familiar rhythm of their collaboration had evolved into something neither had anticipated, a genuine respect that acknowledged both past wounds and present strengths. When Juliet finally gathered her things to leave for her dinner with Elias, she paused at the door. "Will you let me know when you're back from the cabin?" "Of course," Reed promised. "And Juliet, thank you for seeing what could be salvaged when all I could see was what was lost." After she left, Reed remained by the window, watching the snow continue to fall, transforming the familiar landscape of Chicago into something new and unexplored. Like his own life, the view was both recognizable and profoundly changed. The essential structure remained, but with altered perspective and purpose. On his desk sat the unsigned divorce papers that had remained in limbo for nearly 2 years. Beside them lay Richard's letter, revealing a vision of partnership that had been hidden from both Reed and Juliet at the critical moment when it might have changed everything. Reed gathered his coat and briefcase, preparing for his drive north to the cabin the following day. As he switched off the lights in his modest office, so different from the imposing domain he had once commanded, he reflected on the strange journey that had brought him here. He had lost an empire, but gained a clarity no financial success had ever provided. The price of his ambition had been nearly total, but what remained, the man beneath the acquisition and achievement, was proving more valuable than anything he had ever possessed. Outside, Chicago continued its business beneath the falling snow, indifferent to the personal reckonings of those who sought to master it. And in that indifference lay the truest lesson Reed had learned, that genuine worth came not from the empires one built or controlled, but from the integrity with which one navigated both triumph and devastation. Tomorrow he would return to Richard's cabin, now his cabin, to face another superior winter. And when spring came, perhaps something new would emerge from the lasting snow, not just at the lake, but between the two people who had lost and found themselves in the wreckage of ambition's price. If this story touched your heart, and you want to keep following inspiring and moving stories, be sure to check out our upcoming videos, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications to stay updated on new content that can brighten your journey and provide valuable insights. Join us and keep exploring stories that truly matter. I'm sure the next video that pops up on your screen will touch you as well, so click on it now, and we'll see you there.